All right, everyone. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the WSJP College Basketball Show. As always, I'm your host, Zach Reagan, here with my good friend and co-host, CJ Weipz. We've had a very eventful week, huge shifting in the AP poll. We got a new number one team, and the Big East is making quite a stir, namely Marquette. So we're going to get right into it, CJ. I mean, Marquette going on an absolutely ridiculous run in the last 10 days or so, beating ranked Big East opponents such as number 20 Seton Hall, number 11 Villanova, and at the time number 20 Xavier. So can you just break down some of those games for us, and what's been the key to Marquette's recent success?
Well, really, Zach, I think it's just been they finally clicked. I mean, we knew when Shaka Smart went to Marquette that was going to be a huge hire, and now it's really starting to show. I mean, they started off a little bit cold in league play, but this first game against Seton Hall was really their jumping off point, in which they won 73-72 on what I would call a very controversial foul call. You had Greg Elliott for the Golden Eagles kind of jumping into Bryce Aiken a little bit, trying to force and got a foul call in the final 1.8 seconds of the game, which ended up sealing it for the Golden Eagles. It was a great game on both sides. Aiken for the Hall had 28 points in this one, and Alexis Yetna started his tear over these past few games with 15 points and a 16 rebound performance, which he pretty much replicated in the game against St. John's that the Hall was able to bounce back from. But, I mean, on the Golden Eagles side, it was just Daryl Morsell, who's really been the life force of this Golden Eagles team, had 26 points and 4 assists, going 4 of 5 from deep and a perfect 6 of 6 from the free throw stripe. So just a really good performance in this one from Marquette, and it really kind of paved the way, especially after a pretty cold second half. So really just showing that they're able to stay in these games, stay with these top teams, and it gave them a lot of confidence moving forward.
Yeah, more so the prime ball handler for the Golden Eagles has definitely been a guy that stuck out to me. I mean, he's got it. He's the ideal point guard. I mean, he can score, he can dish out a couple passes. He's a pretty solid defender. He's decent, but it makes it work. And if you got a guy like Shaka Smart on your side, I mean, the play is going to be elevated that much higher. So, I mean, that's definitely going to be the case for a lot of these guys. And with the recent success, I mean, I'm sure they shouldn't have much trouble recruiting either in the future.
Oh, yeah, the future looks really bright for Marquette. And we saw that maybe even a few years ago, starting with Marcus Howard when he was at Marquette before he went to the league. So it's always been like that for Marquette. They have a long lineage, great basketball school, great program. Shaka Smart's only going to elevate it moving forward.
For sure. And do you have anything else to mention on some of these other games? Villanova, Marquette only won by 3 in that game, but they were able to get Xavier pretty good, 75-64.
Yeah, in the Nova game, Zach, I really think it does come down to having a big man presence. And I mean, Justin Lewis for the Golden Eagles was really that X factor in this one against the Wildcats. We know that Jay Wright really doesn't have a true big man down there. I mean, Eric Dixon is a nice replacement for a big man, but he's around that 6'8", 6'9" region, so he's not necessarily the biggest of the big men. But when you have a guy like Justin Lewis put 21 points up against the Wildcats, and I mean, in such a low-scoring game like this one, that's really all you need.
Yeah, Justin Lewis, I think he's close around that range as well. They kind of like a stretcher big. He's around 6'7", but I mean, he's able to get stuff done on the wing and wherever you really need him. And even if it's down low, he's the type of guy that's going to be able to make plays. I mean, he's been the leading scorer for Marquette this season, and I mean, sky's the limit for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, sky's the limit for this entire Golden Eagles team. They're going in after this stretch. They have a pretty relatively easy schedule. They have a rematch against Seton Hall this week. I forget which day that is, but that's going to be a really exciting game. They have a rematch with them on Wednesday, and that's their next game. And then they play Providence afterwards, which that's also they play Seton Hall, Providence, Villanova, UConn in the next stretch. So not only did they have to go through Murderer's Row of Hall, Nova, Xavier, but then they have to pretty much repeat that, maybe even more. So it's going to be an interesting few more games for the Golden Eagles. See if they can keep it up. I think they will be for the most part, while I do hope that Seton Hall does try and split the series with them. I think it's going to be just all of these Big East games come down to coaching at the end of the day, and all of these coaches are just incredible. I mean, Kevin Willard, one of the best. Obviously we talk about Shaka Smart. Jay Wright, arguably the best in the nation. I'm not saying he is. Got Nate Oates over at, no. Not.
Nate Oates is over
who's
at
at
Oklahoma.
Who's at Providence? I completely forget.
not. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but I forget
Yeah.
at the moment.
And then Danny Hurley at UConn. So, I mean, a bunch of great coaches, and that's pretty much all the Big East is. It's defense and coaching.
Right.
It's always fun to watch. Oh,
Ed Cooley. Yeah, I definitely knew that.
Thank you, Tone. We love you, Tone.
And, I mean, the Big East super competitive this year. I mean, the top 6 teams, Xavier is farthest back out of that big group, and they're only 2 games back. So it's right now Providence is at the top, followed by Villanova. Marquette is only 1 game back. UConn and Creighton are only 1.5 games back, and Xavier is 2 full games back. But I mean, anything can happen. All of these teams have shown that they have the firepower to take any of these other teams, blow any of these other teams out of the gym. So really, I think it just comes down to who can get like a little lucky, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think the Big East is going to have around 8 teams in the tournament. I mean, we're about 7 days away from Selection Sunday. Thank you, John Rothstein. And Seton Hall right now projected to be around an 8 or a 9 seed, and they are like
St. John's can make a run for it too.
St. John's definitely. I mean, 10-7, and they have the talent. I mean, Champagny, Posh Alexander, just incredible talents, and I think they could do some damage in the tournament. I feel like every single Big East team has the chance to succeed in the tournament, just because, especially compared to teams. I don't mean to kind of discriminate on conferences, but like Pac-12, Big Ten. I mean, obviously you have
definitely though.
Yeah, Pac-12 definitely, but like I mean, the Big Ten, you do have some of those physical guys. I mean, Coburn, you got Zach Edey, Trayvon Williams for Purdue, E.J. Liddell on Ohio State, but like Pac-12, that's not really physical basketball like it is pretty much everywhere else in the nation.
No. Yeah, I mean, definitely some things are going to become evident like that in the tournament, but I mean, these games, the Big East, we're going to preach it all season because they're going to be definitely going to be the conference to watch in the conference play this year because it's just so tight. And similar to that is the Big Ten, and we really saw that when Purdue took on Illinois in a double overtime thriller that we watched last weekend. I mean, that was a phenomenal game. Purdue was able to edge out the Fighting Illini 96-88, and although it's an 8-point game, that does not tell the tale of the tape.
Yeah, definitely not, Zach. And a big part of that 8-point gap, Kofi Coburn fouling out around the start of the first overtime. That was absolutely huge for the Boilermakers trying to get him out of the game because for a lot of it, Trayvon Williams and Zach Edey almost had trouble with Coburn. Zach Edey was able to handle it a little bit better than Trayvon Williams was. But, I mean, Coburn was just a force for both of them who really haven't faced anything that haven't faced a challenge that big in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, both of those guys not giving him a lot of trouble, but definitely making it noticeable for him. I mean, Coburn exited the game. He only had 10 points, 5 rebounds, 2 steals. I mean, not a very impressive stat line when you're talking about a potential Wooden Award candidate. But, I mean, other guys really stepped up. I mean, I was very impressed by Alfonso Plummer's 6 for 12 from three-point range. I mean, he was really one of the guys that kept them in this game. He added on 4 rebounds and 24 points to lead his team. We saw Trent Frazier doing all right. I'm not like a huge Trent Frazier fan, but like as a fan of the team, I'm always itching for him to do better because I know he can, and he just disappoints me pretty often. But 16 points, 6 dimes, 5 boards in this one makes me feel a little better about him. But 3-point shooting, 2 for 9 is not very promising there. 7 for 16 from the field can always be improved as well.
Yeah, and really the guy for this one, Zach, was Andre Curbelo coming off his first game back off an injury, off the bench, 21 minutes.
20 points.
26 minutes, 20 points, 8-15 from the field. He played his heart out, but, I mean, the Boilermakers, you really couldn't stop Stefanovic, man. I mean, 22 points, 5 of 8 from deep, 6 of 11 from the field, and about 50% from the free throw line, 5 of 9. So he had plenty of chances to score, and he was really the big game changer in this one.
Yeah, and he grabbed 8 boards as well. I mean, really physical guy who doesn't really strike you as one, like as the 3-point threat. Typically, they're not the guys that are also going to be grabbing the rebounds, but Stefanovic defies all odds in that aspect. But, I mean, obviously you're going to have great games from Zach Edey and Jaden Ivey. Edey and Ivey dropping 20 and 19 respectively, each adding on 8 rebounds of their own. And Travion Williams, of course, which is like my favorite guy in the country to watch play basketball. He had 14 points, 5 assists, 7 rebounds in this one. So that was a ton of fun watching him take on Kofi Coburn and making huge plays.
Although I feel like in this one, Zach Edey really had the upper edge. Because I don't think you were watching it with me yet, but there were about 5 different times down the floor, back and forth, where they would get it into Edey would score a bucket, and then they would get it down the floor, give it to Coburn would get a bucket on Edey. It was an incredible chess match to watch. But I think Zach Edey, just because he was just that little bit taller than Coburn, about the same weight, just able to get it off the glass a little bit easier. But great battle. I'm excited to watch these two teams battle it out again.
I was really impressed with Edey's footwork.
Yes.
It's like being a guy as big as he is, like it's wild to me how well he moves himself across the floor. Not even that, like when he's making plays, but like with the ball in his hands, I mean it's ridiculous how well he can handle it for being a 7'4" center. But moving on from that game, we also I was able to watch the highlights of number 2 Auburn taking care of number 12 Kentucky 80-71, and this was a really fun one to watch. I mean, Auburn was down by more than double digits during the first half, but by the time the first half ends, they're able to rally within 4 after a big 3 at the end of the half, and then they were just able to take off in the second half. I mean, being at home is definitely going to help you, but the Wildcats just could not touch them until the game that ended. I mean, there was little rallies back and forth now and again, but I mean, it was such a fun game to watch back to, and I'm really bummed that I wasn't able to watch the full thing.
Yeah, and I mean, Tigers have one of the best student sections in the nation, and especially now that they're doing well, it's going to get loud in there. But yeah, I mean, this was what really catapulted Auburn, spoiler alert, to the number 1 team in the nation this week, and really just because they were able to keep Oscar Tshiebwe in check. I mean, the star for Kentucky only had 16 points but 14 rebounds. I mean, he's been a rebounding machine all year. He had 4 blocks and 2 steals. So they were able to limit him a little bit, and they were able to get a lot of their own guys into double digits. Kessler had 19, Smith had 14, and I mean Johnson had 17. So just able to get a lot of their guys involved, not just Jabari Smith, who was obviously the leader on this team. So really a great job.
Yeah, and the game was very interesting because they weren't really even able to limit Tshiebwe, but they definitely put a dent on Ty Washington's play. That ended up being pretty big. He only had 4 points, but again, he did only play 9 minutes. I don't believe he got hurt in this game, but I could be wrong. But Severe Wheeler and Kellen Grady really stepped up their play. They had 17 points each. Wheeler also getting 4 assists. I mean, those 2 guys were really fun to watch. But, I mean, the guy that I had my eyes on this whole game was Walker Kessler for Auburn because, I mean, it was literally like half of his buckets were like from lobs. It was wild. And that's what makes Auburn work because they have a lot of these super versatile players and guys like Keon Johnson and Jabari Smith, but Walker Kessler's the kind of guy where he knows his role. He just kind of sits in the paint and then waits to get fed. And he doesn't have great fancy moves, or he's not like an insanely crazy talent to watch, but he's just a great role player. Just a solid big man to have on your squad. He's 7'1", so he was able to get some great work done down low, despite Tshiebwe challenging him a lot. But, I mean, God forbid if he was able to get open, it was just all over. And there was a ton of times where Tshiebwe would go out to try and guard for the floater or the baseline jumper, and they'd have Kessler right there to dunk it behind him. And that happened so many times, and that's why he was able to be their leading scorer with 19. And I think that kind of play is really what's elevating Auburn to their fullest potential right now.
Yeah, and I mean, Bruce Pearl is emerging as one of the best coaches in the nation right now. Definitely one of, if not the best, in the SEC. Now that Nate Oates' squad has kind of drifted off to sea, I don't know where they're going yet. But yeah, I mean, Auburn, one of the more exciting teams in the nation. Obviously, you got Kessler, but Jabari Smith, you can't really avoid his name too much. He's been really the focal point of this Auburn team, especially earlier in the year. I mean, leading scorer on their team, 15.7 points per game, shooting a pretty decent 46% from the field, averaging 6.3 rebounds as well. So obviously he's their go-to guy, and it's going to be exciting to see how they kind of evaluate this game too. I mean, he didn't even have the best game, and yet they still beat a ridiculously talented Kentucky team.
Yeah, and I mean the SEC is still fairly competitive as well. I mean, definitely not like as vying for first type play that the Big East is, but like the middle of the pack. So Auburn is in first, quite obviously. They're 7-0 in the conference. Kentucky's 2 games back, but then Texas A&M and Mississippi State are both 2.5 games back, and then Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama are all 3 games back. So I mean, and if you really want to count them, University of Florida is 3.5 games back. So that's like a huge pool. Like half of the conference they're going to be vying for leverage in their conference tournament, and LSU is right there with 4 games back, and they're still a quality team. I mean, they're still what are they in the poll this week? They're 19th still. They're still a top 25 team despite losing back-to-back games. They're still going to be a huge team to look out for as conference play continues.
Yeah, and that's the problem, I feel like, with a lot of these really tough conferences. Because when you get to Selection Sunday, the committee has really got to look at who you play and not your record, per se. Mm-hmm. Because you get teams like Tennessee, Kentucky, LSU with maybe like 7 or 8 losses, maybe even 10 losses. But you got to look at who they're playing. They're playing Auburn twice a year. They're playing Kentucky twice a year. They're playing A&M twice a year. Like these are the teams that if you lose to by 1, you could pretty much count it as a win in any other conference.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's kind of my feelings on a lot of these close and really tight matchups between conferences.
Yeah, so, and then when it comes to Kentucky, I mean, they're in a pretty awkward spot right now when it comes to, like, vying for the SEC and just, like, trying to make a name for themselves in the nation in general, because they remain at 12 because they put up a great fight against Auburn. But where do you go from here if you're John Calipari?
Well, I mean, Auburn's just a really tough matchup for you, to be completely honest. Obviously, you got your guys. Yeah, I mean, obviously we knew the big question coming into this was how is he going to be able to fare with a lot of these transfers, a lot of older guys compared to the storyline is that he's always been recruiting. He always had freshmen that he can really mold and shape into his own before they go off to the draft as one and dones. But I mean, you got a really good group of guys. You got Toshibwe who did his thing that night. It's just Ty Washington. I think that was a big problem with us, with him. When we went into the preseason is he going to be consistent enough for the Wildcats day in and day out? And obviously in this game he wasn't. So I feel like once you get him back on track, the Wildcats are one of the most unstoppable teams.
What game we were at one of the football games when they lost to Notre Dame. We were kind of freaking out.
Was that state championship?
It might have been states. Do you remember?
When Kentucky lost to Notre Dame?
We were definitely at a football game.
I think it was states.
Or it might have been Garnet Valley. I forget.
Might have been Garnet Valley because I wasn't there, so it would have been semis.
So they lost to, at the time, number 21 LSU, and then they just lost to number 2 Auburn. So next up they have Mississippi State tomorrow, who is 3rd in the conference. That'd be a big boost for them. And then they have number 5 Kansas.
That's going to be a really good game.
Which should be a very fun game. Now, I don't really know how well they match up against Kansas.
I think it's pretty similar because I think Agbaji and Toshibwe are going to go at it all night.
I think it's obviously going to be the matchup to watch, but that's definitely going to be what makes this team and sort of It reminds me of kind of what we thought of Villanova at the beginning of this season, where they were losing to. Obviously, they have all these quality losses that are able to keep them so high in the AP poll because they're still a 4 or 5 loss team at this point, and they're still top 10 near. I think they're 11th.
No, I think they're 15. 14.
They're 14.
Yeah, they dropped 3 spots.
Right. They lost to Marquette.
Marquette.
But they're still a top 15 team with 5 losses, because we've established that they're not going to be able to beat a top 5 team this year, or even a top 10 team this year, if we're going to be honest. And I think we're starting to see this a similar pattern with the Wildcats. It's sort of like these better programs are clearly distancing themselves. I mean, their best win, Kentucky's best win, is probably against. It's definitely against number 22 Tennessee at the time, and they whooped them 107-79. So I think that's easily their best win. But since then, they haven't, or even before then, they didn't really have any great wins. They beat North Carolina, but we've pretty much established that they're not going to be as good this year as we thought they might be.
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, not much to show for a number 12 ranking. But I mean, they're certainly still in the fray, and they're certainly going to make the tournament. There's no doubt about it. But how far they can go, I think they're a relatively early round exit.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a lot of teams this year, Zach. Obviously, you kind of hope that they kind of figure it out, but I feel like looking at the AP poll right now, I do feel like there's an absolutely massive distinguishing.
Like a tier.
Yeah, there's definitely a tier.
A hierarchy, if you will.
Yeah, I think that tier kind of cuts off at Houston right now.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Duke is 9 and Houston is tied for 7th, which is actually incredible.
Yeah.
Same amount of points, UCLA, Houston.
We don't get many ties. That's so weird.
Yeah. First thing I've ever seen. But, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a break there because Duke has been all over the top 10 this year.
Uh-huh.
So they've been that inconsistent. But, like, Houston, UCLA, Purdue, Kansas, Auburn, Gonzaga, Arizona, Baylor, like, all those top 8 teams have just been staying right around where they normally do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, besides Baylor, who is now number 4 for some reason. I don't know why they aren't higher than Arizona, but
Arizona's just been killing it in Pac-12. They only have 1 loss. That's why. It's
Yeah.
because Baylor lost twice, remember?
Oh, yeah, shoot, they did. Who did they lose to the second time?
They lost to Texas Tech and I want to say like Kansas State.
Oh, was it a really bad loss?
I think it was pretty bad. I'm going to check real quick to make sure.
I believe you, but like they haven't been moving since the start of the year. So that's like the top tier of college basketball. And then you get into great but inconsistent. I mean, the Duke, your Kentucky's. You could probably throw in Villanova there.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're really good. Texas Tech, you could probably throw in there as well.
I mean, like your Michigan State and your Wisconsin right here are like those sort of teams.
Yeah, exactly. And they have the talent to be in that upper tier. It's just they don't have the consistency. But I mean, we'll see when it comes time for the tournament. But because that's ultimately what's going to tell us who's consistent and who's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be one of the most competitive tournaments this year, for sure. And then, well, next up we're going to talk about, what are you showing us?
Oh, they lost to Oklahoma State.
Yeah, they lost to Oklahoma State.
Bro, Tone's coming in clutch today.
I did pull it up. I was about to say it, but thank you anyway. We have a couple big upsets we did want to cover as well. In the ACC, Florida State was able to upset Duke to put them down to 9. I mean, they barely edged it out, but I mean, Caleb Mills had a great day. I just wanted to touch on this game real quick just because it shows, I mean, perhaps we counted the ACC out a little too early.
I don't think so. I think we're fine.
Well, it's clearly going to remain relatively competitive. I mean, Duke isn't going to be just the lone team at the top by 5 games by the end of the year.
They might be. Because, I mean, FSU right now, I mean, great win. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but, I mean, they're a 5-loss team at the moment. 5-2 in conference play. I mean, 5 losses in the ACC. I mean, it's like it's almost like playing at a disadvantage because you get teams like Villanova who have 5 losses and they're number 14 in the AP poll just because of how tough their conference is. You get FSU, who there have been people around the office saying that FSU should be ranked right now, but when they have 5 losses and they play in the ACC, like...
Yeah, it doesn't really mean too much.
Yeah, exactly.
However, Florida State, with that win, does jump ahead of Duke in ACC polls by half a game. But, I mean, this is super competitive, the ACC is right now. Miami and Florida State are tied in first. Duke, Notre Dame, and Wake Forest are all back only half of a game. UNC, Louisville, Virginia are back 1.5 games. So, like, that's 8-ish teams that are still vying for a first-place spot. Granted, Duke will take it. That's not much. That's not up for much debate. But whoever, I mean, there's going to be a couple of teams. I'd say like 3 or 4 ACC teams might be able to make the tournament. It might be a little like 3. I'm thinking like 3 or 4, leaning towards like 3 teams. I think can make the tournament.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna. I think Miami. I'm not quite sure about Florida State though. I mean Blake Wesley's been playing out of his mind for Notre Dame. I mean he's like a top 5 freshman in the country. I mean he's been doing really well. If you haven't heard his name, I mean he's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the AP poll right now, Zach. FSU right now has more AP votes than Miami.
It's because of that big win against Duke.
It is against that. It is that big win, but I mean, even Wake Forest.
Miami also beat Duke, though.
Miami also did beat Duke. You know who didn't beat Duke? Wake Forest. They have 12 votes. Miami has 4. I don't get it, but yeah. So
Miami must have had a tough loss.
So they're not only are they going to make the tournament, Zach, but they are going to have some decent seeds too. I mean, around 5, 6, 7 seeds.
Oh, it's because Miami's lost to Florida State twice.
Oh, so they got swept.
Yeah, so that's their big thing.
Ooh, that's gonna come back and haunt them.
That's gonna be their big issue. But obviously, ACC is gonna be very competitive within the conference, but it's not going to be like it shouldn't be taken into too much account. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's not like it's the Pac-12 where you have to have like a minimum, or maximum 2 losses to be in the AP poll. Yeah, USC.
Yeah, and then both Alabama and Tennessee took down number 13 LSU this week. Alabama beat them 70-67, bouncing back from a ridiculously tough stretch of late. I mean, we were considering them like a top 5 team at just a couple of weeks ago, but now after their 13-6, they lost 3 straight before their win against LSU, and they'd lost, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They lost 5 of their last 8 before their win against LSU. A really rough stretch for a super talented team, but it looks like they're back on the rise with a big win against LSU. They beat Mizzou. They'll have Georgia tomorrow, which should be, cross our fingers, a relatively easy win for them. And then they come back with a ridiculously tough stretch in Baylor, Auburn, Kentucky. So that's going to be what makes or breaks.
Dang.
That's going to be what makes or breaks their season this year, and it's going to be so fun.
Yeah, Zach, and I think one of the lessons from the LSU game is really just the fact that they were able to win this one 70-67. They shot 20.6% from deep.
Yeah, but how many shots did they put up?
34.
Yeah.
They shot 7 of 34 from deep. So if they're able to beat an LSU team like this, I mean, they should. I still have no clue what to do with the Crimson Tide at this point.
I know.
Because they're all over the place. I mean, theoretically, you would think that a team with Jaden Shackelford and Javon Quinterly, Jelly Fam Javon, should be doing a lot better than they are right now. But, I mean, they're up and down. Up and down.
Rough losses against 2 A-10 teams. I mean, that just shouldn't happen. Memphis and Davidson.
Oh, that's tough.
And then
that's tough.
We talked about the Memphis loss. And then
we did.
And then they split with Mizzou and they lost against Mississippi State, which puts them at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th in the SEC. So, I mean, they have the chance to gain some more momentum before taking on what's going to be the roughest stretch of their season, of like any team's season this year. You're literally going to have to play
perfect
perfect basketball, 2 top 5 teams in the span of less than a week. And then you play number 12 Kentucky, who's going to be one of your fiercest rivals in the conference.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's going to be a really fun part to watch. So, definitely I'm keeping my eye on the Crimson Tide for the rest of the season.
Yeah, this is literally make or break, and I don't have enough faith in them to really make it through all of these. I mean, even if they do go 2-1 at least, they should be fine. They might get a pretty high seed when it comes to the tournament, maybe like a 9 or a 10, is what I'm thinking. But yeah, they're so filled with talent that they should not be underperforming this much. But I mean, really good win against LSU though.
Yeah,
they got
for
sidetracked.
Sure. Yeah, I mean they are. I think some of that momentum will help them carry over, and even if they lose, let's say they lose these 3 games, but it's close games, it's gritty basketball. I mean, there's certainly a case to be made for Alabama to get perhaps a higher seed, but if they're a low seed, like a really low seed, teams better be on upset alert because it's going to be so fun if they're able to make a run late in the year.
Yeah, and they're definitely one of the scarier teams in the nation just because they're so much better than what their record shows.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel that way about a lot of teams. I feel that way about Seton Hall because they lost a bunch of crappy games. But yeah, I mean 12-6, they are not a 12-6 team. Just as like LSU is probably not a 15-3 team.
Right.
Like records can be really deceiving. And I mean, you probably know Tennessee definitely not worth their record.
No, Tennessee. Well, I think Tennessee is definitely a 13-5 team. I mean, they've been pretty mid recently. They're clocking in at 18 in this week's AP poll, thanks to another win against LSU. They were able to get one out 64-50, led by Santiago Vescovi, shooting 5 from 11 from the field, 5 from 11 from deep, getting himself 16. So. I mean, that's certainly going to be able to help if you're able to actually hit shots. I mean, shooting 35.7% from deep, that's certainly going to help your cause. And they played their signature gritty Tennessee defense, and holding this potent of an LSU team to only 50 points is pretty impressive.
I mean, they saw what real barn burner basketball looks like, and they're like, you know what? We need to win these games. So, I mean, great job by the Volunteers. In this one, I mean, LSU has really been on a skid, especially this being their most recent loss. But, I mean, LSU started off with Arkansas of all teams, tough loss to them, 65-58, and then Bama and now Tennessee. And now they go into a pretty hot Texas A&M team on Wednesday, so that'll be important. That'll be a really big bounce-back game for the Tigers, see if they can really get back on track.
And then, on the contrary, Tennessee, after losing really bad against Kentucky, has been able to... They came back against Vanderbilt. They got a quality win at LSU, and they have a pretty nice schedule until they play Kentucky again, and they should win all these games. They got Florida...
Mm-hmm.
Then Texas, which is going to be a tougher one, but they're out of the AP poll this week.
Yeah, Texas hasn't really been that good.
They kind of fell off the face of the earth. I mean, they're definitely one of the teams that's better than the record shows because there's so much talent on that roster.
Yeah, Corny Rainey, Marcus Carr, who I completely forgot was on that team.
Yeah, I mean, every college basketball fan was so excited for that transfer, and then like nothing happened.
None of the transfers this year have been really good. I've noticed, because I mean, you got Carr going down to Texas, but then you also have Remy Martin at Kansas, and I think from what I've seen, he might be out for the rest of the year with injury.
Who was?
Remy Martin.
Oh, really?
He really hasn't been doing it. He didn't really do anything for Kansas, even when he was healthy. So.
Yeah, like Carr has been averaging like 11 points per game, which. I mean, this team is super talented, but like Timmy Allen has been doing pretty good. He's averaging 11.7. Andrew Jones is averaging 10 on the dot. Trey Mitchell, he's definitely he's probably their best big man behind Allen. he's averaging 9.3, and Ramey only averaging 9.1 this year.
Yeah. So.
I mean, he was significantly better last year. I don't really know what the deal is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess it's because he was the star on that Minnesota team, and then Timmy Allen comes along, and you're like, oh. Because I think that's genuinely what happened to Remy Martin, is the fact that he comes from ASU, where he was the number one guy, although not really last year because of Josh Christopher and Marcus Bagley. But, like, if he stayed this year, he would have been the number one guy and probably would be averaging 20 points plus a game.
Probably, yeah.
Especially because Bagley's hurt right now. And I don't even know when the last game Marcus Bagley played. But anyways, like, a lot of those guys are going in from situations where they're the man, and then they're trying to get into, like, these new systems where they have to really play, like, team basketball, or where they're maybe not the number one scoring option. I don't think it's really working for them.
Or where there's just such an abundance of talent like there is on Texas. I mean, because these are all guys that we knew the names of last year. I mean, you have like a full rotation of these super talented players, and then they just can't seem to make it work. Like, you can't just like infest it with talent and expect stuff to work sometimes. You need some of those guys that know their role, and that's how you're going to get – you need good role players. Guys like Walker Kessler, who we talked about earlier. I mean, that's why Auburn's been playing really well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, besides that, back to Tennessee, they have Florida, Texas, and they have Texas A&M, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt again, and then Kentucky. So they shouldn't be losing another game until mid-February.
A&M's going to be tough, though.
A&M might be tough, but to be honest, I haven't really heard too much about them.
I haven't either, but they've been on a pretty big tear. I mean, I'm looking at that matchup predictor right now, and as of now, Tennessee 90% chance.
There you go.
So there you go. All right.
The matchup predictor has Texas winning 56%.
Ooh.
So that's definitely going to be a game to watch.
That'll be big.
So, with that, we're just going to round it out with talking about the biggest game tonight by far, maybe one of the biggest games of the week. We got Texas Tech versus Kansas tonight. So that's definitely going to be one we're watching. And I'm super excited to see obviously Texas Tech has been a Titan killer in the SEC and beyond this season, but this is going to be the game where we see if they're legit.
Texas Tech is in the Big 12.
Same thing. This is going to be the game where we see if Texas Tech is legit.
I thought Baylor was that game.
You thought, right? And then Texas Tech lost to a bummy team.
Oh, Kansas State.
They lost to Kansas State.
They did lose to Kansas State.
That's who it was.
Kansas State's a Titan killer, bro. They've been
They
are like that.
Yeah, that's who. They beat Baylor. Texas Tech beat they lost to Iowa State, then beat Kansas, then beat number 1 Baylor, then beat Oklahoma State, then lost to Kansas State, beat number 15 Iowa State, beat West Virginia, and now they're coming into this one. So it should be a fun one, but you seem to think they're going to pull it out.
I do. I really have a lot of faith in this Texas Tech team, especially after their win against Baylor without Terrence Shannon Jr.
True.
So... And they beat Kansas without Terrence Shannon Jr. And now Shannon comes back. He just dropped 23 points against West Virginia. Like, this team has so much talent, and because they're so good defensively, they can play with literally anybody. And, I mean, that really showed against Baylor, who I thought was probably the most untouchable team in the nation at that time. But then, Texas Tech is like, hold my beer. So,
exactly.
This team is so exciting to watch. They might not be the best shooters or maybe like even the best athletes, but just because they work so hard, and they're just able to capitalize, and that's really what's been big. But I mean, I think this Texas Tech defense is just really going to be able to shut down Kansas, even though they have probably my favorite player in the nation in Ochai Agbaji and Jalen Wilson, who are both coming off of 20-point games, respectively.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a crazy matchup game, and Texas Tech's defense is certainly something to marvel at, but, I mean, Kansas is one of the most high-flying teams in the nation, one of the most potent teams offensively. I mean, it's going to be that sort of battle where you have, like, one of the nation's best offenses against one of the nation's best defenses, And I think Kansas State's going to prevail. Just simply, I know it sounds stupid, but they're just going to be able to hit more shots than Texas Tech. I'm just like, Texas Tech isn't a great offensive team, and I think that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I could see it just being a shootout, or just when it comes down to that. I do think this is. I really don't know at times, especially when it comes to Texas Tech, or even when it comes to Kansas. Kansas has been probably the more consistent, has definitely been the most consistent team in the Big 12. Only 2 losses. One of them was on that crappy tip on Thanksgiving Day, when Dayton put that in.
Yeah.
That was crazy. I was going crazy in the car ride. I was next to Ricky, so we were both going crazy together. And then obviously to Texas Tech. So, I mean, Terrence Shannon Jr. could have gone to the league last year and decided to stay. And he's one of the most dynamic players in college basketball right now. Could be up for second team, third team All-American this year. He's just that good, and literally nobody, not really a whole lot of people know about it. But I feel like if he has a really good game tonight, he's gonna put his name on the map, and it's gonna be wonderful.
So then, moving on from that, we kind of talked about this week's AP poll, and I just want to go over it very briefly. But what really shocked me is that Auburn gets number 1 finally. I thought they should have gotten it last week, to be honest. Gonzaga is down a spot. And then Arizona somehow got 1 first place vote, which was really funny to me. And
That doesn't make sense.
It's just so weird, but regardless. I'd love to see that guy's ballot. But anyway.
It's all Pac-12 schools.
Yeah, Baylor at 4 makes sense. Kansas at number 5. Purdue falls to 6. I'd still have them over UCLA. And UCLA and Houston are tied for 7th. Duke at 9. Michigan State still holds their own at 10. But what matters is that they're still above Wisconsin, who's at 11, which was a fantastic win from Sparty. They were able to take down Wisconsin, mostly because Tyler Wall wasn't playing, but I'm going to ignore that simple fact and just say that Michigan State wipes.
Michigan State wipes Northwestern?
But that's why they're still at number 10. Moving on.
Boo booey.
Moving on. Kentucky at 12, Texas Tech at 13. Nova's still hanging around the top 15 somehow.
Why?
USC's still hanging around the top 15 somehow. I think they
16.
belong. I think they belong there, actually.
Yeah, I mean, 2 losses, you're fine.
Yeah.
USC has been dominant.
Even
this
though the
year.
Pac-12 is trash.
Isaiah Mobley's an absolute stud.
He really is. And then Ohio State at 16.
That's surprising.
Not too surprising.
I'm surprised they're still in the top 20.
Really?
I think UConn is better than.
Oh, that's
Ohio
a bold.
State.
That's a bold take. I don't think so.
I believe that wholeheartedly, right here.
I think the Big Ten's still a tougher conference than Big East right now. But Providence at 17, Tennessee at 18, LSU at 19, UConn 20,
Respectable.
Xavier 21, Marquette 22,
Yep.
Iowa State 23. They had like a really bad loss over this last week. Illinois is still clawing at it. They're at 24. And then Davidson at 25. And then some notable teams to still get votes. BYU led the pack. Alabama, Texas, Florida State. Loyola Chicago lost to a really bad team. That's why they're out.
Missouri State, I think.
Yeah, that might be it.
I think they have 3 conference losses right now.
Indiana gets 10 votes for beating Purdue. I think it was. Trace Jackson.
Indiana?
Yeah, wasn't it?
Or Wisconsin.
Was it Wisconsin?
I'll double check. We're great we're great journalists.
We really know what we're talking about, you guys. And then Miami, Seton Hall still gets its 1 vote.
I love that. Imagine if it's the same guy that put Arizona as number 1.
You're just trying to be the most interesting ballot on there.
Dos Equis? Let's see. Yeah, it was Purdue. You're right.
It was, okay. We do know what we're talking about.
But they
Breaking
copped a
news.
fat L to Michigan, bro.
That was it.
Oh, that's tough. Juwan Howard.
And then
Florence.
Davidson sneaks in at 25, so I didn't expect that or know how good they're doing because I don't follow.
They just won on a buzzer beater the other night. It was insane.
I don't follow crappy basketball.
Oh, come on now. Come on now.
A10, stop
Mid-majors are great.
A10 basketball, please. But, overall takeaways from this week's poll?
Nova should never be introduced into an AP poll ever again. UConn should be higher.
I think UConn should be higher, but not above Ohio State.
I think they should be above Ohio State.
Who did Ohio State lose to?
Bad teams.
No. Hold on, I got it. You talk more. So there's no dead air.
Yeah, I love UConn, and not just because of Danny Hurley, because they have such a great chemistry. When I saw them play in person, it was almost magical to see both when it was Seton Hall UConn, because RJ Cole, a Cook, Santiago, like all those guys work so well together, and Big East basketball especially, they know their roles, and when they work together, they are pretty much unstoppable. And I think if you put them head to head, obviously Liddell's going to win his matchup, but I don't think Ohio State really has anyone who can guard RJ Cole and a Cook both at the same time. They're just too dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, you always have Wheeler, but guarding them both is going to be a challenge.
Because RJ Cole was pretty much shut down. Actually, no, he wasn't. He did pretty well in the Seton Hall game, but he fouled out early, and that's that was why Seton Hall lost, because they didn't have to worry about him or any of the other three guys that could shoot it from three on the floor.
All right, so rounding this out, Ohio State lost to Xavier, at the time number 23 ranked Florida, Indiana, and number 13 Wisconsin. However, they did beat number 1 Duke. They beat number 21 Seton Hall, and they beat number 22 Wisconsin. So, I mean, you still have quality wins there.
You split it with Wisconsin. That's a good look.
And that's quality losses. So, and they have Purdue this Sunday.
That's going to be the biggest test.
It's going to be the biggest, and I'm very excited for it. So that'll just round out the show today. Thank you to everyone that tuned in, and be sure to subscribe to the new WSJP YouTube channel, of course. Follow us on Twitch as well at SJP Broadcasting.
Yep.
That just about does it. For CJ Weipz, I'm Zach Reagan. Thank you all for listening, and